Parisian Elegance in a Narrow Living Room, the Bistro Table Layout Guide. Hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Interior channel. I am so glad you're here today, because we're going to tackle something that I know many of us struggle with, regardless of where we live: London, New York, Sydney, or Toronto. Today, we're stepping inside a truly classic, compact Paris studio to answer a difficult design question. How do we bring elegance and functionality into a living room that feels more like a hallway? If you've ever seen a floor plan of a typical historic Parisian apartment, you know they are rarely perfect squares. Often, they are long, narrow, and slightly awkward spaces. When you first walk in, it can feel incredibly restrictive, almost like the walls are closing in. It's the kind of space that makes you want to embrace minimalism simply because you feel you have no other choice. But that isn't the Parisian way, is it? The French have mastered the art of living with style, no matter how limited the square footage. They don't see a cramped room, they see an opportunity for intimacy. Today, I want to share my personal philosophy on solving the narrow room dilemma, not by trying to make the space look bigger, but by making it feel more intentional, sophisticated, and above all, uniquely you. We are going to unlock the secrets of the iconic bistro table layout. Let's change our vocabulary right from the start. We're not dealing with a cramped space, we are curating a cozy one. My opinion is that huge, open-plan homes can often feel cold and lacking in character. A small, narrow room, however, forces you to make decisions. It demands that every single item you bring into it is either deeply useful or incredibly beautiful, ideally both. This is the foundation of educational design. This isn't a new problem. Parisians have been living in compact spaces for centuries, particularly in those charming converted chambers de bonne, maids' rooms, on the top floors. Because of this history, French furniture design has often focused on elegance that doesn't require immense space. They prioritize pieces with a small footprint, vertical height, and the ability to serve multiple purposes. This is where we will find our inspiration. Think of the great French designers like Jean Prouvé or even the Art Deco elegance of Émile Jacques Roullman. They understood balance. Roullman, in particular, was a master of the refined line. We can use that approach in our narrow rooms. We are aiming for a look that feels curated over time, combining vintage warmth with clean lines, ensuring the room feels sophisticated and storied, not just cluttered with modern, bulky furniture. Before we even place a piece of furniture, my first piece of opinionated advice is to look up. In these narrow spaces, we must utilize the vertical plane. Are there high ceilings? Can we add simple crown molding to draw the eye upward? The French use light, mirrors, and vertical lines to counteract horizontal crampedness. We aren't trying to trick the eye into thinking the room is wider, but rather making the atmosphere feel airy and sophisticated. Now, let's talk about our hero piece, the classic Parisian bistro table. Why is this small, circular item the absolute savior of the narrow living room? In my opinion, it is the single most versatile piece of furniture you can own in a small space. Its magic lies in its shape and its history. It brings immediate vintage character, but functionally, its circular design breaks up the harsh, tunnel-like straight lines of a narrow room. A round table fundamentally changes how you move through a room. Rectangular tables have sharp corners that require wide clearance. You always feel like you might bump into them. A round table, however, allows flow. It has a soft, organic shape that encourages traffic to glide around it smoothly. In a narrow room, moving those corners is the single most important step in making the space feel passable and comfortable. When selecting your bistro table, I urge you to look for vintage authenticity. For our US, UK, and Australian audiences, you can often find great reproductions, but nothing beats a flea market find. Look for a heavy, black wrought iron base, often cast with ornate details, and a thick marble top, perhaps with a brass rim. These materials bring a sense of history and weight to the room that cheap, modern alternatives just can't replicate. The real educational tip here, however, is the pedestal base. Unlike a standard table with 4 legs at the corners, a bistro table usually has a single central support. This means you can comfortably tuck chairs all the way under it, saving precious floor space when it's not in use. It also gives you more legroom, making the seating experience feel less restricted despite the compact size of the tabletop itself. Let's move on to our first layout guide, the Corner Nook. In many narrow living rooms, there is a corner near the window that goes unused because it seems too small for an armchair or a sofa. My opinion is that this is the perfect spot for your bistro setup. It transforms a useless, empty corner into a purposeful, charming destination. It's no longer a leftover space, it's the morning coffee space. Place the bistro table snug into that corner, perhaps just a foot away from the walls. If you have a classic French window, the kind that opens inward, make sure the table is positioned so you can still open the window fully. This arrangement leaves the entire central pathway of the narrow room clear, creating that crucial sense of flow and preventing the dreaded obstacle course feeling. What about the chairs? You have 2 lovely options here. For a classic, cohesive Parisian look, you can use 2 matching French café chairs, the woven rattan style in burgundy or dark green. However, if you want a look that feels more artiste and collected, my opinion is to use 2 different vintage chairs. Perhaps one bentwood Thonet chair and one antique Louis Philippe style chair with velvet upholstery. This isn't just a place to sit, it's a design statement. Above the table, on the two corner walls, you need to create a vintage vignette. Think of small, antique gold frames with sketches, or perhaps a vintage mirror to bounce light. In my view, adding a wall-mounted accordion lamp, like those inspired by mid-century French industrial design, is perfect here. It provides task lighting for reading without taking up an inch of space on the table or the floor. The second strategy is perhaps more challenging but incredibly effective: the floating zone. If your narrow living room is extremely long, it can often feel like a bowling alley. We need to break that length up. In my opinion, the best way to do this is to place the bistro table and chairs in the middle of the room, effectively creating two distinct zones. On one side of the bistro table, you might have your main lounge area, perhaps with a small, sleek-lined sofa and a very narrow coffee table, or no coffee table at all. On the other side, the table acts as a divider. It signals that you are moving from one room to another. This layout is brave because it deliberately places furniture in the path, but because the table is round and open underneath, it works. The educational key to this floating layout is the passage. You must ensure that you have at least 24 inches, about 60 centimeters, of clear walking space on both sides of the table. You are essentially turning your rectangular room into a space with 2 hallways, flanking a central island of furniture. This setup is wonderfully social and feels very European, as it encourages you to interact with the whole space. To make this work, the bistro table needs a visual anchor. A round rug, placed specifically under the table and chairs, is essential. This defines the zone and prevents the furniture from looking like it just landed randomly in the middle of the room. A vintage Persian or Turkish rug, with its rich, faded colors and detailed patterns, provides that crucial touch of vintage charm while grounding the entire arrangement. Our third strategy is for those lucky enough to have beautiful, large windows, the window watcher. Parisians adore their windows and the concept of flânerie, observing life. Even if your view is just the brick wall of the building opposite, in my opinion, placing your bistro table directly in front of the window can be transformative. It makes the window itself a focal point, drawing your attention through the space and toward the light. This setup isn't just about aesthetics, it's about lifestyle. It encourages you to sit, have your croissant and café, and connect with the world outside, however small that connection is. It turns a tiny living space into a sanctuary. In my view, design should always support these daily rituals that make life feel richer. A small plant on the sill, the sun hitting your face, it's pure joie de vivre. When placing furniture directly in front of a window, the number one rule is don't block the light. You must choose very low-profile seating. Again, bentwood Thonet-style chairs are ideal because their backs are made of thin, curved wood and often cane, which you can see right through. They provide function without visually stopping the view, ensuring the room feels as bright and open as possible. In this window watcher layout, you must be ruthlessly curated. You can't clutter the windowsill. In my opinion, one beautiful antique ceramic pitcher used as a vase, or perhaps a single, perfectly aged brass candlestick, is enough. You are honoring the window as a frame, and everything in that frame must be intentional and elegant. Less is more, but less must be high quality. Now that we have our layout, let's talk about styling. True Parisian elegance often has an element of decontract, an unstudied, effortless feel. It shouldn't look like a staged showroom. My opinionated advice? Don't line your chairs up perfectly straight. Have one slightly turned. Have a throw blanket casually tossed over the back, though we both know you spent 10 minutes perfecting that toss. This makes the room feel lived in and human. If you want to create atmosphere, my strongest opinion is to avoid using harsh overhead lighting at all costs. Instead, create pools of light. Use lamps. A vintage floor lamp in a far corner, a small table lamp on a side table, and perhaps those wall-mounted sconces by the bistro table. This layered lighting creates soft shadows and highlights, adding depth and coziness that completely negates the narrow, harsh feel of the room. Your artwork in a narrow room is vital. Instead of one giant, modern piece that dominates the space, my advice is to create a small gallery wall. But not a mass-produced one. Use a collection of smaller, vintage pieces, old maps, botanical prints, family photos in antique frames. Group them closely together. This draws people into the space, encouraging them to look closely, rather than focusing on the room's narrow proportions. The finishing touches must speak of quality. A linen napkin, not a paper one. A vintage silver spoon, perhaps a bit tarnished, for your coffee. An antique French book, its pages yellowed with age, resting on the bistro table. These small, relatively inexpensive details are what truly communicate Parisian charm. They show that you value quality and history over fleeting trends. We've covered a lot today. We learned that a narrow room isn't a problem to be fixed, but a unique challenge to be embraced. We discovered the incredible versatility of the round bistro table with its pedestal base. We explored how to use it in a cozy corner, as a bold floating zone divider, or as a serene windowside perch. And we discussed how authentic vintage details can bring true Parisian elegance. My ultimate hope for this educational journey is that you feel empowered. You don't need a huge budget or a massive house to live with elegance. What you need is intention, creativity, and a willingness to make brave choices. I believe that by embracing the philosophy of curated, not cluttered, and intimate, not cramped, you can turn any small, awkward space into the most loved room in your home. Thank you so much for joining me in this little exploration of Parisian style. I genuinely hope this script has given you some practical, educational ideas for your own narrow living room. Which bistro table layout do you think would work best for you? The corner, the floating, or the window? Please let me know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this storytelling approach to design, please do consider subscribing. À bientôt. See you very soon.